can understand why dogs like these. Hi guys, and welcome back to Scale Motor. So, part 2 of our, I look like a right hippie end, didn't I? I got my hat on, my hoodie, and my peace sign. Anyway, part 2 of the Suzuki GSX-RR Team Ecstar 2020 bike. Fairings, 2K and decals before the 2K. That's a Roland trick, that is 2K before the decals. Anyway, went really well. I was really looking forward to putting down the 2K, and looking back now that it's done, looking at the actual finished pieces, yeah, it was well worth the wait. It just makes those colours and those decals just pop. It looks amazing. So we're going to go through in this video, we're going to go through cutting the body parts off the sprue, getting them stuck together, filling any areas that needed filling. We're going to be priming, obviously, painting silver, masking, painting the blue. We're going to blast through the decals quickly because apart from the Suzuki logos up the side, the rest were pretty straightforward decals. Blast through the decals, and then we're going to jump into that 2K. We're not going to polish in this video because I'm still leaving that 2K set. I just want to kind of get an update out there on the build. So that's coming along. It's been a little bit of a delay. I've had a couple of things going on the past couple of days. I've been cutting mask sets for people. I've been working, and I've been looking after the dog as well because he's a menace. But he's a good menace. He listens. He's just making sure we keep it up with his walks and everything. It's a couple of things. Obviously, we recently, within the hobby and the hangout and the live show, had a bit of bad news. And there was a friend of ours, Mr. Gary Pashley, unfortunately did pass away suddenly. It's not. It's hit us all. Knocked us a bit for 6. But we're going to be doing a group build in honor of Mr. Gary Pashley. He loved F15s, so we're going to be building some F15s. It's going to be my first proper playing apart from that 2-hour speed build I done on the live show, which was atrocious. So this is going to be a however many hour build, and it's going to look atrocious, but it's a great little hobby. F15. Let me know if you'd actually like to see that on the channel. I wasn't planning on filming it, but if that's something you want to see, let me know, and I'll record it along the way. But enough rambling from me. I do enough of that in the voiceover. Let's jump straight in and crack on with this Suzuki build. So first up, we've cut our body parts off the sprue, and we're just going to clean them up. This is the front fender. It comes in 2 parts, unfortunately. Not a problem, though. What we're going to do is we're just going to trim away any excess and the sprue gates. And we're just going to offer it up, make sure it does fit, and make sure there's no kind of leeway either side, just to make sure when we do glue it, we get it together as it should be. And then once we've done that, we're going to come in with our Tamiya extra thin. We're going to hold it together. We're going to run a pretty generous bead along the back. We're going to rub our fingers off, make sure we don't get any extra thin on our fingers, because then we'll end up getting disgusting thumbprints all over everything. And then again, we're going to come in with another generous helping of the extra thin over the top. We're going to give it a push together so we get a bit of molten plastic oozing out of there, and then we can sand that bead away. And sometimes we get a nice filled seam, not always. So we will come back in later with something different. But now we're just gluing everything together. These parts here, for the tail, there was a H-shape piece in the middle, as you can see, and then the 2 sides go together. and then we've got this top piece, and it does say in the manual, so keep your eye out for it, but there's a natural kind of seam on the actual bike which goes around this, because this part will come off, so don't fill that whatever you do. There's another little tiny bit which goes on the back on the bottom here. This fits really, really, really well. There's not actually a seam here on the actual bike, but this being underneath and such a good fit, we didn't bother filling this because, well, it can't really be seen. It's going to be painted over and there's going to be a decal going there, so I didn't worry too much about it. We've got this little piece on the side, which I believe is a rain light for rainy races, just so the guys behind can see where the bike is in front. Just test fit in, make sure it did fit after a cleanup, and it did. So we're just going to apply a little bit of glue on the inside there, and we're just going to give this a little push. Again, this doesn't need to be filled because it is a piece which just comes off. Now, seam lines, there weren't too many. They were in quite an easy place on the tank. Thankfully, it's a one-piece tank, so we don't have to bother filling the line up the middle, which is rather annoying, especially that kind of dip for the rider's chin when they're in their kind of full tuck. So, yeah, we just had a couple of seam lines going along the edges, and we've come in with the UMP sponge sander. I believe this is the 240. I always forget, but it is my favourite sander. It's great for getting rid of seam lines. It conforms to the plastic surface, so you don't lose any of the shape or the profile of the parts. So we're just going to go around and we're going to just feel, I'm just feeling the edges there, just to see if there is a bit of a seam, and they seem a little pointy, so I give it a little sand. We didn't take much off, it's not really noticeable. I don't think there is actually a seam here, I'm not too sure. But yeah, the seams were along the top in a kind of U shape from the front, coming looping around the filler hole, and then there was one going down the back of the tank. So next up we've got these two little fiddly bits which go on the kind of inside of the nose cone. I almost forgot these, Paul had to remind me. And they're a little fiddly, they can only go on one way correctly, so just be careful. The only slightly annoying part is that has to be filled. There's a seam between the nose cone and these parts when you glue them in, which isn't there on the real bike. So that did need to be filled and sanded, but that wasn't too much of a problem, and we'll take a look at that shortly. Just make sure you've got them on the right side. Test fit them first because they were a little confusing, and then I just put a little bit of the extra thin down just so it would hold the piece in place. You've got a little bit of working time, so you could slide it around, and then we put a generous amount underneath, and we did give it a little push just to make sure it was in place and welded together adequately. And there we go, now we come on to the fill-in, and I'm using for the very first time some sprue goo, which is essentially just the lasts of a bottle of Tamiya extra thin with some old cut up discarded sprue melting, and it makes kind of like a molten plastic. Now I think this is a little thick, you can see it was quite stringy there, so just be careful because it is essentially just liquid styrene at this point, and it'll you can see how stringy it is. I'm applying it with a cocktail stick. If you are applying it with a cocktail stick as well, just give it a little twirl and it should there we go, I'm twirling it and it should get rid of those stringy bits. It was my first time using it, so I thought I'd just go in all guns blazing, and I'm just dabbing it on the seam and making sure I don't get it anywhere else, because we want to minimize the sanding afterwards, because the less chance of misshaping a part or anything, the better. We went along the bottom. I'd already done a bit on the bottom, but I'd seen I missed slight bit, so I'm just adding a little bit more. We did go pretty generous on the bottom, as you can see, but this is not a problem because once this dries it is pretty much just part of the part. So because the extra thin melts the plastic that's already there too, and it joins up nicely, and it can be sanded really, really well to a nice smooth finish. So here we go, we're just starting the sanding. I did start with a UMP sander, but the shape of this, it's got a little concave in it, so what I done is I went in with the Tamiya sanding sponge, 600 grit I believe, and I just got the first kind of the bulk of it out of the way, and then we went in to neaten everything up and finish off with the UMP sanders. Again, not entirely certain the grits I used for the UMP sanders because I always forget because I'm a melon, but we used that the dark grey one you can see on the bench just behind my hand, and then we used the light grey sponge, and then we come in with the blue side of the buffer, then the white side of the buffer, and the plastic looked absolutely brand new, and the seam was all but gone. So yeah, excellent job. Quite happy with the sprue goo. The only thing is we had to wait a couple of days for it to dry adequately, otherwise I did try sanding it beforehand just to see how it reacted, and it doesn't react very well. And then we're back on the Nosecone. We got these little bits, just be very careful because there are some moulded in panel lines on the edges there, close up to the front of the Nosecone. Just be careful you don't get rid of any of these, and make sure you're not changing the shape of that part and rounding it off, because there is quite a kind of a point to that corner. So just take your time and you shouldn't have any issues. There we go, we're coming in with my favourite, the 240 I think, and then once we were done with this we come in with our buffer, and here we go, we're using the blue side first just to start using the blue side of the buffer, and then we'll come with the white side, and the white side you should start hearing a little squeak, and you'll see it is a lovely clean shiny part, looks brand new, and you can't really see that seam anymore. Okay, then we're on to the paint, and we primed everything with Mr. Surface Fella Boy Guy 16, 15, whatever 100, and yeah, we're spraying this through our UMP Apex with a 0.35 needle, and we're going to build up the coats slowly. We just want to make sure we get every little kind of area and we get nice even coverage. So 3 coats I ended up with in total. It is thinned with Mr. Rapid Thinner because at the time I didn't have any leveling thinner or retarder type thinner, but that didn't cause a problem. It still went down really nicely. Thinned about 60-40 thinner to paint, I believe. I'm not sure. I started off at 50-50, added a little bit more thinner just till it went through the airbrush nicely, and yeah, we sprayed away. I'm making sure I get the back side of the parts. I know we've got like some white tack and stuff in there, but that's not a problem. It's just get the most of the areas done. I'm not sure if it's going to be carbon. I've got a carbon set coming from Studio 27 directly, so that's really good. Can't wait for that. And then he must have spotted that pesky postman again. How dare he come delivering us mail? Probably bills anyway, doesn't matter. Anyway, we're just going to go around everything and make sure we get in all the nooks and the crannies and the dips and the divots and everything. And then, yeah, first coat is a little thinner, a little drier. It does look wet and it does look quite thick, but this primer covers excellently. So yeah, it does look like a lot more is going down than it actually is. This paired with that UMP Apex with the 0.35 needle it just makes priming an absolute dream. And there we go. You see we got all parts, and this is our third coat. You see we got that nice lovely satin finish you get with the the Mr. Surfacer, so I am well impressed. Yeah, prime job went perfect, no issues at all. Okay, once we were all primed and our primer was all dry, it was time to start with our silver colour for our base coats. So we've got the Zero Paint Suzuki GSX-RR Team Ecstar colours, and I've got to say, I was pleasantly surprised with them. I've had issues with Zero Paint in the past, as have other people. I'm not going to get into all that. Everybody knows the issues which can arise with Zero Paints, but thankfully no such issues occurred. As you want to do with Zero Paint, you want to build it up, or any kind of automotive lacquers, you want to build it up in thin coats, leaving at least 5 minutes in between each coat to for the paint to off gas and the thinner to evaporate, and then you can come in again with the next coat. You want to avoid any crazing, but these went down really, really well. The pigment sizes were tiny and the metallic flakes were tiny, so they went down without a hitch. At one point I did purposely on a hidden area kind of hose the paint on, do a big wet puddle, so there was a lot of thinner there as well, just to see how it would react. And yeah, I had no crazing at all. The first time I did try it, there was a little bit of crazing, but it was practically on bare plastic, so you would expect that from any kind of automotive lacquer or any of these thin hot paints. But after we got a couple of coats down, I tried again with the blue later on, which I think I left in, so you should be able to see, and yeah, we had no issues at all. So we were building this up slowly. I think I finished off with 5 or 6 coats. Just keep building it up until you get a finish you are happy with. Make sure to paint everything. Like the tank is meant to be blue, but because the fairings have silver first then blue, we done the tank silver first then blue to make sure we had a nice uniform colour all over. This is our last coat. You can go on a little bit thicker. You don't have to worry too much once you've got a nice kind of coat down to protect the plastic. But again, don't hose it on. You don't want a super wet look. You just want nice even coverage. I'm just making sure we get in all those kind of turns, the kind of bends in the plastic and the fairings and all the crevices as well. So we want to make sure we got nice full coverage. Okay, once we got that silver down, we were going to leave that. I left that overnight just to make sure it was nice and cured, and then we come in with mask sets. This mask set is a file I was given by Mr. Douglas Weir, and I've cut them on my Cricut. Let me know if you're after any. Give me a message on Instagram or Facebook. The links will be down in the description, and we can get something sorted. But yeah, you would have seen these in Paul's video as well, because I sent a set to Paul so he could use. Just saves cutting them out. It's so much easier. And this is kind of the only way you can get them exact to each other. So you could spend ages trying to cut them out, and you can. I've done it before, and I'm not saying there's an issue with doing that. It's just this way you're guaranteed uniformity. So yeah, not much of a problem. We set the back in place. We briefly set the front in place here, then stuck the back where it needs to be, and then peeled up the front just to make sure. Peeled up the front and stuck it back down just to make sure it was where it needed to be. These ones on the side, very easy to locate. The back end fits right up on the edge of the fairing, and this little pointy out bit at the front there, there's a little indent which goes around the indent in the fairing where the winglets connect. Just want to make sure it's on nice and tight. It doesn't really matter if the kind of front side is creased. The part you want exact is the top of the mask, which is where we'll be painting the blue.
But again, these masks are pretty easy to put in place, and once we've got them on both sides, we just filled any other areas we didn't want painted with regular Tamiya tape. Moving on to the side, there were two separate little masks for the side. One for the lower part where we're going to paint blue, and one for the upper part where we will be painted blue. Now, you could do what Paul done in his video, and to be honest, I would probably suggest doing that. So he put fairings together pretty much and then masked up just to make sure the demarcation lines did line up. I didn't think of doing that. I very stupidly put my confidence in the masks, assuming that they'd just go on lovely and they'd work fine. Thankfully they did. We've got no issues with mismatching demarcation. So, but yeah, I would always suggest doing that, just because that way then you know for certain they're going to line up. So yeah, I'm not going to show me masking everything up just because it was pretty basic and it went down really simple, and if you just look at your instructions you shouldn't have an issue with that. I'm just going to show briefly how we just kind of filled all the areas we didn't want painted with Tamiya masking tape. This is Tamiya 10mm masking tape. Just fill in the gaps. Make sure you kind of go around the sides as well, because you don't want like any paint bleed, or you don't want any kind of faint kind of blue overspray areas. With the blue paint being the same paint as the silver paint, it would be a little bit harder to remove than say if they were two different types of paint. But with them both being lacquers, it might be a little bit harder. So a little bit of time masking here will avoid that annoyance later on. And then we move on to the blue. Again, lovely paint, went down really well. Really pleased. If the newer Zero paints or anything like this, then I think I might be buying a lot more. So we were just spraying on our glove there just to see how it comes out, how thick it is, how thin it is, and it is quite a thin paint, so you might need a couple more coats just to get that colour you're after. But again, we're going to apply it like the silver, and we're going to do nice thin coats, building up to that colour that we are after. I think in total with the blue we ended up with 7 or 8 coats, I forget. But just standard rule of thumb, just keep going until you're pleased with the result. Check it against references, check it against other parts, make sure all the parts are uniform, and then stop. You don't need to go any further when you're happy with the colour. And here's the tank. As mentioned, we painted that silver first as well, just so the blue would be uniform all the way through the bike. And you can see just how thin that's going on, and I don't know if that's just because of how thin the paint is, or just how thin we are applying it, but that was the extent of our first coat. You could see there was just a slight hint of blue. But yeah, you can see I'm not pressing, I'm not pulling too far back on the trigger, not letting loads of paint out. You can adjust your trigger tension for this, but there's no need, to be honest. Yeah, just slowly build it up, and remember to leave it in between coats for those 5 minutes, just so you can make sure that paint is off gassed. And here we are, we're coming in a lot later with, I believe, our 7th or 8th coat, and you can see that blue is popping a lot nicer. Like I said, it's a beautiful blue, and it matches the decals really well. Currently the fairing pieces are sitting in front of me in 2K, and yeah, they look great. So with these masked areas, what we generally tend to do is spray kind of away from the masking tape, so at a 45-degree angle towards the painted part, the part we want painted from behind the masking tape. If that makes any sense whatsoever. Don't spray directly on the demarcation. I know we're doing thin coats, but we want to minimize any chance of any bleed through, just because with these two such contrasting colors, the silver and the blue, it would be extremely noticeable. And like I said earlier, bit of a nightmare to clean up with two similar makeup paints. I mean, paints made of the same stuff, not paints used for makeup. Do not put these paints on your face, please. There we go. You can see that blue splodge where I sprayed it on really thick, and there's barely any crazing at all there, and now you can see that is running. And later on we came back to that, and it was absolutely fine. No crazing. So, yeah, extremely happy. Now, my favourite part, and probably one of the most daunting parts, is peeling off that masking tape. I was a little worried, obviously, because I didn't know how this mask set was gonna react. It's just the Tamiya masking sheets cut on the Cricut, but thankfully it performed really, really well, and we got no bleed through anywhere, and we got a nice demarcation, nice straight, sharp demarcation. Excellent. Super pleased with the result. Just see me picking away at that masking tape with tweezers. If you are going to be picking away at the masking tape with tweezers like me, just be very, very careful, because if you're like me, you can be really clumsy and end up scratching parts. Yeah, I've done that before, so yeah, just be careful. The one thing I like about these Tamiya masking, the kind of masks which came with this, which we've now cut, is those little tabs which fold around the fairings, which you've just seen on the top there. It makes it so much easier to remove the masks. And there we go. Not an issue anywhere with the masks. All came out really, really well. You can see we've got a nice uniform colour. So that was the benefit of painting that tank silver first. So, next up is the decals. And at first I was a little worried about the decals, because they are... so the big Suzuki logo which goes across the side, that's pieced. Excellent. I was a little bit worried of lining that up, so we put all the fairings on, screwed them in place, and lined it up that way. But what is annoying is you've got the Ecstar logo on the 100th anniversary marking on the side underneath the Suzuki logo, and they aren't split. So yeah, that and the Suzuki along the bottom, they aren't split, and I had a few issues with those when it came to splitting them, unfortunately. So yeah, slightly annoying, but that's one of the main reasons I'm putting the bike together like this, just so I can stick the decals on, and then once they dry, give them a cut, put a bit more decal solution on, so they'll kind of conform around the edges of the part. So as you can see, we started with the Suzuki decals going up the side, because these to me were the most daunting. Just sliding them around, making sure they're in place. We've put a bit of micro set down underneath. I know Paul was having some issues with his micro set. I don't know if it's the micro set or the paint, but thankfully I didn't have any of these issues. I did, after doing this side, just move to just using straight water, just because I was a little bit worried after Paul mentioned the issues that he had. But yeah, we had no issues on these first pieces. So first of all, we put a bit of micro set down. We put in the decals in some warm water, just to remove them from the backing paper. And then we have got some wet fingers, and we're moving these decals around on our not freshly painted, it's been left overnight, just so I know the paint is off gassed. And yeah, we're going to move them around with wet fingers, make sure they're exactly in place. One of the easiest ways to line up this decal, I found, is line this up exactly where you think it'd need to go, and then you can hold that down with a wet finger and make sure the rest is in place. Checking your references, looking at the box, looking at the decal callouts, just to make sure, making sure that's sufficiently moist so we can stick that down, and then we can line up that SU part, or the first half of the U on the front fairing, with this one, and then the rear one can be lined up with what's there. So Just wanted to give a quick brief overview of what we've done, and there's a quick look at the one side, and then I'm just going to blast through very quickly, setting down the decals on this side. It's at 400 times speed. I'm not just working super duper fast. So yeah, I'm going to use this to just briefly explain how I apply my decals. I mentioned briefly how we lined up the Suzuki logos on the other side, and you're just going to see me do it here. I opted to do the back side first on this side, just because I'm right-handed, and the way kind of I would have put down the other decals, if I'd done this last, I know I would have ended up pushing them and moving them around. So again, we moved away from the micro set by this point, so we've just put some water down. Again, the warm water. We put the decal in the warm water, and we've slid it off the backing sheet and then placed it down where we think it needs to go. And once it's there, we've got our cotton bud, and we're just lightly rolling over to make sure any moisture is out from underneath, and we've got that decal sitting where we wanted it. And then once we've done that, we are just rolling over some of the UMP strong decal solution. I believe that is the strong, yeah. And then we're just going to leave that. We're just going to leave the decal solution work its magic while we are placing on the other decals. Again, this is similar to the other side where it goes around the fairing bolt, so it seemed easier to set that up first. I mean, slide it where you think it needs to go, then set that up, and then you can make sure that that is in the right place, and that should help the rest be correct. But yeah, we're gonna do the same. Just going to try and roll out any excess moisture underneath and just get it sat down. If you're if you're playing with the decals with your fingers, make sure you've wet your fingers. If you've got a really dry finger or a sticky finger from dry decal solution, you can end up pulling it up, which is obviously not something you want to do. And be careful with the cotton buds, because you can end up ripping the decals up if the cotton buds are kind of molten, if they're not tightly wound, which is why I always try and go for good quality cotton buds, because the kind of cheap billion in a pack you get on Amazon will be just generally a bit of fluff super glued to the end of a paper straw or something. So yeah, just go for the good quality cotton buds. And again, same thing, rolling out that moisture and then rolling over with some UMP strong decal solution. And then once those are done, we've gone back with a wet cotton bud first to roll out any moisture or any excess decal solution again on this rear part of the Suzuki logo. And I'm opting for a nice gentle roll technique. I'm not pushing down too hard to start, because you can end up moving the decal if you do that. Just gently rolling and giving it gentle prods to conform to any bends or creases in the fairings. And then once that's done, we're going over the top with some UMP extra strong decal solution, just to kind of give it that final push to set into place. The rest of the decals from there were pretty straightforward. The kind of Ecstar and the 100th anniversary ones, we just popped on the side, waited for them to dry with a little bit of the decal solution, and once they were kind of sufficiently in place, we just come through with a nice sharp blade just to cut them. And you can see here everything's blowing away because I've used a bit of heat just after the decal solutions just to get it to conform. And once all that's done, we're moving on to our 2K. Now, I was really looking forward to this part. Paul mentioned that he used about 12mm in total, so I thought I'd mix up 12mm just to make sure. So what we've done is we used 6 milliliters of the gloss clear. This is the Gravity 2K. and we put the 6ml in our multi-use ramekin, which once the 2K has been done, we just give it a quick swill in the tap, and then we can take it downstairs to make a creme brulee or a souffle or whatever. For legal reasons, do not do that. But anyway, 6ml of the gloss clear, then we've got 3ml of thinner. We're using a new pipette for each one, just because we don't want any cross-contamination, and we don't want to start the kind of reaction early or anything, or we don't want to ruin the bottles. Making sure this is all mixed up, mixing up with the pipette we've just used, giving it a stir, squeezing it into the pipette, squirting it out of the pipette, and just thoroughly mixing it up. You'll be able to tell when it's thoroughly mixed. You can see a kind of like slick effect when you first put in the thinner. You can kind of see the thinner separate, but the more you mix, you'll see a nice, clear, consistent paint, I guess, or varnish. Yeah, so once we've put that in, we are getting rid of that, and then we're using another pipette, and then we're coming in with our activator or hardener or whatever it is you want to call it. Again, we used 3ml. So 6 and 3 is 9 and 3 is 12. So we've got 12 in total. Some quick maths there. But yeah, these pipettes go up to 3ml, so that's great. And then we followed the same process as we did previously, and just give it a nice big stir. And a gravity Spain do say that you get an hour's working time with this. I haven't really needed an hour's working time, so I haven't really tested it, but it does have quite a nice working time. Mix it all up, and then we're going to come in with our first coat. Our first coat is going to be a kind of sticky tack coat, and we want it not too thin, not too thick. We want it to look kind of textured. To steal a phrase by Dan over at the Dan Cave, which you've probably heard me say quite a few times already, we're looking for some shiny sticky pebble dash, and as you can see, we've got that kind of sticky sandpaper appearance, and we're going to go around all of our parts, and we're going to do the very same coat. Now I'm using the 0.2 needle in the apex, not because that's what Paul did in his last video, just because that's the cleanest airbrush I had to hand, and to be honest, it did come out quite nice. I think at the end I might have gone a bit too thick in some places, so a bit of careful sanding may be needed, and we did get some bits and bobs, some little dust and hairs in the finish, which is slightly annoying, but should be able to polish those out nicely. Okay, now moving on to a second coat, and this one's going to be thicker. We're not going for a super duper wet coat straight away. We just want a nice uniform kind of finish. It doesn't really matter if you get any like orange peel or anything at this moment, because our last kind of wet coat is going to be filling in that orange peely kind of look. Just make sure you're nice and uniform over all of the pieces, just because it's just you'll get a better result if you take your time and you know, pay attention to how much paint you're putting down, not just with 2K, just in general. This is I'm turning around to count, 1, 2, 3, it's my fourth time? Can I count? Yeah, it's my fourth time using the 2K, and I thought it'd be a bit more of a learning curve. I thought it'd be a little harder to kind of use nicely, but no, it goes down really, really well. If you haven't tried 2K and you do have a spray booth and everything, and you have the means to try 2K, I definitely suggest it. It's the best looking clear I've ever got from a model, and it hands down beats anything out of a can or with a brush or a bottle or any floor polish or anything. Yeah, you just get the nicer shine, and if used correctly, it doesn't look too thick or out of scale, as some people say. Yeah, don't really understand that shiny to me. I can understand how it can look too thick. In like corners and edges, it can build up, and that can kind of look out of scale. But if you've got a nice uniform coat, I don't think I don't think you can beat it for a clear, and it's so polishable as well. Yeah, I'm going to be using 2K a lot more, and the Gravity Spain stuff does last quite a while as well. Like, I've done 3 cars and this bike, and I'm looking, and I know I've definitely got enough left for at least 1 car. So I'll be using it further on in the build, I'm guessing, for maybe some carbon parts. Just waiting on the carbon set to arrive from Studio 27. So yeah, we'll see later on in the build. But yeah, excellent stuff. Okay, and this is our 3rd coat. You can see it's going down a lot wetter. We're not hosing it on until it's running. We just want a nice, uniform, glassy looking finish. What I tend to do is get this coat down really, as consistent as I can, and then look back over the parts just to spot any orange peel. If you're quick enough, you can just add a bit more of the 2K and it'll level out. It does have some self-leveling properties, and it will level out slightly, but you don't want to just leave the orange K, I was going to say then, doesn't make any sense, the orange peel, because that will end up having to be polished out. In some places it is unavoidable, and it's not too much of an issue if you do end up with some. But there we go, there's our nice kind of glassy finish. So there we go, another part done and dusted. Yeah, you can see at a couple of pictures, but there, that 2K did come out really nicely, and the decals went down quite well. I did have a couple of issues, which you might have spotted in the photos, of the Suzuki logos down the bottom, where I did rip a bit off with the cotton buds, unfortunately. We come in with some paint, just some white paint to sort that out. We used, actually I think I used Citadel Corax White, which was a little tip from Mr. Carr as well, over at Black Rifle Model Works, just to get a nice kind of uniform undercoat, and then over the top with a bit of white from Valejo. I didn't show that in the video because that was a very last minute thing before the 2K, and I didn't manage to catch that, unfortunately. But yes, one tip when using Citadel, if you're not familiar with the pots, make sure they are closed really tightly, because otherwise you will shake them and then get covered in paint. I heard from an outside source. But anyway, yeah. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you have enjoyed the video, and you are enjoying the build, and you want to see that F15 in the future maybe, or just want to follow along with any future builds, please don't forget to subscribe. Easy to do, just click the button. Give us a like as well. We're trying to get over 50 likes on each video, just because I have noticed they do a lot better once we're over that 50 like mark. Just like the last Suzuki video I done. I don't know if it's the subject matter or what, but it's my best performing video. It is. It's going really well. So thank you guys for that. Again, give us a like and a comment, and best of all, subscribe. But yeah, that wraps up another video. Thank you guys for watching so much. I should have the next one up. It might be a little bit longer. I've got a week off next week, so that gives me plenty of time for building and for storming ahead. So hopefully by the end of next week we'll have another 2 parts up. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. I'm just waiting on that carbon set as well, which is going to slow me down a bit. But yeah, it shouldn't be too long. So yeah, by the end of next week, hopefully we'll have 2 videos up. After this, I'm going to do the frame and kind of just follow through the instructions. But yeah, I'm going to stop rambling on now. I'm going to leave you get on with your day, as if you're watching
still. Anyway, if you are, let me know about the F15. You want to see me build that? I'm going to build it anyway. So if it, if you want to see a video build of me doing an awful job of an aircraft, let me know. But again, for the third time, thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you next time, but in the meantime, have a great day and stay safe.